Omerta. The silence that tells the tale.
They will call him a Don for the rest of his life. Men will lower their eyes when he enters a room. Judges will take his calls. Priests will save him the best pew. But here is the secret. Almost no one in that church will ever know the day they bury him. He never wanted any of it. He wanted to be an honest man. For a while, he was. This is the story of how an honest man becomes something else entirely, without ever choosing to. He was born the second of 5 children, in a neighborhood that judged a man by his hands. How hard he worked them, how little he complained. His father was a stonemason, and a proud one. Proud in the old way, the kind of pride that refuses charity, refuses shortcuts, refuses the easy money that men on the corner always seem to have. We eat less, his father used to say, but we sleep easy. The boy believed him. For years, he believed him completely. He went to school, actually went, sat in the back row, did the work, walked straight home instead of lingering on the corners where the older boys gathered in their good shoes, laughing too loud, spending too easily. His mother lit a candle every Sunday and thanked God her son wasn't one of them. He wasn't lazy, he wasn't slow. He simply had no luck. And in that neighborhood, luck mattered more than character, no matter what the church told you on Sundays. He apprenticed at 15 to a carpenter, learned the trade with real pride, believed, the way only a boy who has never been truly tested can believe, that hard work was a kind of armor, that if he simply kept his head down and did things the right way, life would eventually notice and reward him for it. Life did not notice. The carpenter's shop closed when the boy was 17, the owner in debt to men who did not extend patience. He tried factory work next, long hours, brutal pay, foremen who fired boys for asking questions and rehired their cousins the same week. He tried again, and again. Every honest door he knocked on either stayed shut or opened only long enough to take something from him before closing again. By 19, he was falling behind everyone he grew up with, even the ones who'd made worse choices than he ever had. He watched boys who dropped out at 14 now, walking in better coats than his father owned. He was ashamed of that thought, the first time it crossed his mind. He pushed it away. He kept trying the honest way. His father grew sick that year. The stonework had ruined his lungs. Decades of dust settling somewhere it was never supposed to go. Medicine cost money the family didn't have. Rent was due regardless of anyone's lungs. The boy took whatever work he could find, and it was never, ever enough. He was not looking for trouble. He was looking for a way to keep his father breathing through the winter. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday, which is how these things always seem to happen, never on a night that announces itself as important. He was working a delivery job, legitimate, barely paying, moving crates for a man who ran a small grocery that fronted for something larger, though the boy didn't know that yet, or didn't let himself know it. A rival crew jumped the truck 2 streets from the warehouse, not for the crates, for the man who owned them, a small-time operator who'd apparently missed a payment to someone bigger. The boy was alone in the truck when it happened. He was not supposed to be brave. He had no reason to be. But when the men dragged the grocer out of the passenger seat and started in on him with their fists, something in the boy simply moved. Not thought, not decision, just motion. He grabbed the tire iron from under his seat, and he did not think about consequences, or the future, or the fact that he had never so much as raised his voice in a fight before that night. He thought about his father's lungs. He thought, if he thought anything at all, that this man, this small, frightened grocer who'd never done him any harm, did not deserve what was happening to him. Two of the three men ran. The third did not get up right away. The grocer lived. The boy went home that night and was sick in the gutter outside his own building, hands still shaking, and told no one, not his mother, not his father, not a single soul, what he had done. But word travels in neighborhoods like that one faster than any newspaper. By the end of the week, the grocer had told his suppliers. The suppliers had told a capo who ran that stretch of the block. And the capo, a careful, unsentimental man, did something the boy never expected. He sent for him. He walked into that meeting terrified, certain he was about to be punished for interfering in business that wasn't his. Instead, the capo poured him a glass of wine he didn't touch and asked him a single question. Why did you do it? The boy, because he was still, in every way that mattered, a boy, told the truth. He hadn't done it for money or respect or to prove anything. He'd done it because it was wrong, what was happening, and his body had decided before his mind had the chance to talk him out of it. The capo studied him for a long moment. Then he laughed. Not cruelly, but like a man who has just recognized something rare. That, the capo said, is the only kind of loyalty that can't be bought, and it's worth more than every made man on this street. The boy did not want a place in that world. He said so, plainly, and the capo respected him for it. But respect, in that world, has a strange way of becoming obligation. The grocer he'd saved began sending gifts to his mother. Neighbors who once looked past him now nodded when he passed. Men started arriving at his door, quietly, respectfully, asking him to settle small disputes, the way you'd ask a trusted uncle rather than a soldier. He hadn't asked for any of it. It simply began arriving, the way weather arrives, indifferent to whether you'd invited it. He tried, for almost 2 years, to hold the line, to keep working honest jobs by day, while this strange, unearned reputation grew around him by night. But honesty didn't pay his father's medicine, and the family that had begun forming around him, loosely, informally, out of gratitude rather than any oath, began to depend on him in ways he hadn't agreed to, and couldn't, in good conscience, walk away from. His father died that second winter anyway, despite every bit of money the boy had scraped and borrowed. And at the funeral, the boy noticed something that broke something loose in him, permanently. It was not his mother's tears, or his siblings, huddled in their thin coats. It was the sheer number of men in good coats standing respectfully at the back of the church, men who had never met his father, men who had come only because of what his own son had, without ever choosing to, become. He understood, standing over that grave, that the honest road he'd tried so hard to walk had led nowhere but to his father's early death. And the road he'd never wanted, the one that found him on an ordinary Tuesday with a tire iron in his hand, had, without his permission, already made him powerful enough that an old capo now called him boss, as a joke that wasn't really a joke anymore. He did not choose the crown. The crown had simply been quietly placed on his head, meeting by meeting, favor by favor, funeral by funeral, until one day, he could not say exactly which day, men were no longer asking for his help. They were asking for his permission. By the time he was 30, he ran territory he had never fought a single street war to claim. He had inherited it the way a man inherits his father's debts, quietly, without ceremony, simply because no one else stepped forward, and everyone had already started treating him as though he had. He ruled differently than the men who came before him, because he had never wanted to rule at all. He was slower to violence, faster to mercy, and this, strangely, made men fear him more, not less. A Don who kills without hesitation is predictable. A Don who chooses mercy and is known to be capable of the other thing when truly provoked is something far more unsettling to sit across the table from. He remembered what it was to be an honest man who couldn't catch a break, and so he quietly funded the honest men in his old neighborhood, paid apprenticeships, covered medical bills, made sure no other boy's father died waiting on money that never came. Some called it generosity. Others, more accurately, called it penance. He never stopped being, underneath the suits and the respect and the fear, the same boy who once believed hard work alone was armor enough. He had simply learned, in the cruelest way, that the world did not agree with him. And once you have learned that lesson at the price he paid, you do not easily unlearn it.
Power, once it settles on a man's shoulders, whether he asked for it or not, does not stay quiet for long. It draws challengers the way a lit window draws moths. The test came in his early 40s, when he believed foolishly he would later admit that mercy alone could hold an empire together. A rival faction, sensing softness in a Don who was known to prefer patience over bloodshed, made a move no honest reading of the situation could ignore. They went after his family directly, not soldiers, not warehouses. His wife's car, run off a wet road late one night, she survived, but barely, and their youngest child had been in the back seat. He sat at the hospital until dawn, holding his son's small hand, and understood with a clarity that frightened him more than the accident itself that the version of himself who once refused to raise a fist unless someone else was in danger no longer had the luxury of that restraint. This was no longer a stranger being beaten in an alley. This was his own blood. He did not act in rage. That was, perhaps, the most frightening part of what came next, how calm he was. He gathered the men he trusted most and asked only one question of each: "Are you certain?" Certainty, in his world, was the only currency that mattered when the answer was final. What followed was swift and precise and utterly without spectacle. No headlines, no bodies left as messages, nothing that could be traced back through a courtroom. The men responsible for that wet road simply stopped being seen. Their operation, piece by piece, was absorbed so quietly that most of the city never understood a war had been fought and finished before it had even properly begun. He never spoke of it again, not even to his wife, but something in him closed that year, like a door that had been left open his entire life, finally shutting for good. He was not, and would never again pretend to be, a man who could afford mercy toward anyone who threatened what was his. The strange mathematics of that world meant this single act of necessary ruthlessness did more to secure his rule than a decade of careful diplomacy had managed. Rivals who once tested his patience now understood, without needing a second demonstration, precisely where the line was. Capos who had quietly wondered whether their boss was too gentle for the chair stopped wondering. His own family, the family he had built, the one that had installed him in this seat without ever asking his permission, finally, completely belonged to him, and he to it, in a way that no funeral or favor ever could have accomplished. He hated what it had cost him to learn that lesson, but he never doubted for the rest of his life that it had needed learning. A man who protects nothing eventually loses everything he loves to men who protect what's theirs without hesitation. He had simply, finally, become one of those men, not out of appetite for it, but because the alternative was burying more than just enemies. He ruled for decades, and the empire around him grew larger and colder than anything the ordinary Tuesday of his youth could have predicted. The old capo who first summoned him died of old age, content, having lived to see the frightened boy become the most respected man either of them had ever known. But an empire built on unwanted inheritance carries its own particular grief. He watched younger men chase the crown the way he never had, hungrily, loudly, willing to spill blood he would have avoided spilling. He tried to teach patience. Few listened. The world outside was changing too, growing sharper eyes and longer memories, wiretaps, informants, a government finally learning to speak the same quiet language his world had always spoken. They will call him a Don for the rest of his life and long after it. But if you had asked him, truly asked him, in a quiet moment near the end, he would have told you something that would surprise every soldier who ever feared him. He never wanted the crown. He wanted once simply to be an honest man in a world that made honesty a luxury he couldn't afford. One ordinary Tuesday changed that. Not ambition, not greed, a single, unplanned moment of decency toward a stranger, and the world around him decided, long before he ever agreed to it, exactly who he was going to become. That is the truest and the saddest thing about the seat of the Don. The men who deserve it least often want it most, and the men who deserve it most rarely ask it.
The light fades, but the code remains.